Welcome to the Skinny Podcast. It's the weekly potpourri edition. I'm Richard Skinner, local12.com digital sports columnist and editor with Rick Brewing. As always, it's presented by Blake, the attorney Maislin. My favorite event on the sporting calendar is underway today, the Masters. We don't have Masters to talk about on this show, but I just thought I'd get it out there. We're a little over a week away from actually 2 weeks away from the NFL draft starting, officially 2 weeks away from today. We'll talk a little mock draft on this. The Reds righted the ship a little bit in San Francisco. We'll get an update on that. And the transfer portal is hot and heavy for some, not as hot and heavy for others. We will discuss that. And, of course, my portion of the podcast where you can ask me a question on any topic. Just hit up the hashtag AskSkinnyAnything on the Xverse. Rick, it is my favorite time of year. I know you're not a huge golf fan, but I've got pools all over the place. I got pieces of paper scattered everywhere. I'm going to hunker down after this podcast, watch a little bit of Masters, and I love this weekend.
Well, I'm happy for you. I'm happy for guys like Jed Demusy, a good friend, former colleague of ours who's very into the golf. So I know a lot of people love this weekend. It's not my thing, but go ahead and do what you do. Now, you said we're not going to talk about the Masters, but I did have an Ask Skinny Anything question here that someone asked for your Masters pick. So real quick here off the top, since we're already talking about it, do you have any bets or picks that you really like here?
I do. I've got, and he's already underway. And for full disclosure, I made this bet yesterday. It's a future bet. I got like 8 golfers, a couple of 90 to 1s in there. I think I got Jason Day to win it at 85 to 1. Just sprinkle a little bit of money. But I got a chunk on Rory to win it, and then I've got another pretty good chunk on Joaquin Niemann, who was tearing it up on the Live Tour. He actually got off to a 3-under start today. I think he's 2 under. He bogeyed a hole. He's 2 under through 7 holes as we're doing this podcast. Those are the two I've got the heaviest wagers on. I stayed away from Scotty because I didn't like the odds, and it'll probably come back to bite me. I mean, I got a Rory at 6.5 to 1. I thought that was pretty good value. He's never won it. He's going for the career slam. He's playing great. So, yeah, I'm going to go a little chalky with Rory because he is the second betting choice in the futures odds. But Joaquin Niemann, I got at 33 to 1, hot off the Live Tour.
All right. Good stuff there. I know people are interested in that. I don't really have much to offer there. So there's your little Masters segment. Let's get into some Reds talk now. They're sitting at 5-8 overall. 2 weeks into the season, basically, now at this point. They did win their first series over the last few days in San Francisco against the Giants. They should have won all 3 of those games. But, Skinny, did you see any signs of life from the team over the last 3 games and that series in San Francisco after a really rough start?
No, I think what I've seen, though, is I feel really good when most of these starting pitchers are on the mound. And Nick Martinez has had some rough patches, and maybe when Andrew Abbott's ready, he's throwing a couple of, I think 2 now starts down at Louisville on a rehab assignment.
Seems like he might be back this weekend.
Yeah, and to me, I think we've talked about this. I just love Nick Martinez in that swing bullpen role where he can get you 3 innings on a day, maybe even if something happens early 5 innings. But man, the starting pitching's been listen, it's not going to pitch shutout baseball every game. But I mean, how do you not feel good with Nick Lodolo on the mound? How do you not feel good with Hunter Green on the mound? With Brady Singer at the moment on the mound? With what still is to come when Rhett Lauder gets healthy? I think this starting pitching is going to keep them around. And right now, all you are is cross your fingers mode of some guys snapping out of slumps. Will Benson came back up and looked like the Will Benson of last year where he struck out, I think, his first 4 times up in Wednesday's game. I mean, he just feels like a classic 4A guy. The guy I'm interested in is to see, I think we talked about this on last week's podcast with Noel Marte. Whenever they felt comfortable that he's, I guess, right at the plate, might be the time to bring him up. Now, Matt McClain's injury kind of forced that hand a little bit probably. I hope they didn't rush him back. I hope they felt like he was ready because if he can get back to the 2023 form, that's a solid ball player all around from fielding to and they fix some of his throwing mechanics in spring training. So hopefully that helps him at the plate. So I'm interested in that, but there's really not a shot of injection. Otherwise, it's more guys who are in slumps, hopefully get out of slumps.
With the starting pitching thing, because I'm with you, it's been very impressive to start, but I also think about last year, and I feel like for a month or 2 of last year's season, we kind of started off going, man, it's fun to watch these pitchers every night, but they're not getting a lot of support. Should you feel good about the fact that the pitching is going well as a Reds fan, or should you be almost more concerned about the fact that they are getting these really good starts and they're not doing much with them? They're not winning games. What happens if the pitchers hit a little bit of a rough patch, or they just have some normal games where they get hit around a little bit more and they're not lights out like they've been mostly to start the year? I mean, is that a more concerning thing that they're not making more hay as the pitchers are doing well to start?
No, that's a fair point. And listen, some of the guys who aren't hitting didn't hit last year either. So, maybe right. My hope is unfounded. Again, I'm still bullish on CES. I probably will be until he proves me otherwise. And at the moment, he's proving me otherwise. Yeah. I mean, it is concerning for that. I'll give you that part of it, but I just don't know if this pitching is going to hit a slump. And again, there's a lot of arms in reserve. Last year, Rhett Lauder wasn't ready until the season was basically over.
Right.
And then he came up and was like, Chase Burns isn't ready at the moment, but Lauder's ready. Chase Petty's close to being ready. Abbott's close to being ready. I mean, even an old guy like Wade Miley, when he gets back, I mean, could maybe give you something if you need it as your 9th or 10th starter. So that's the thing I think I'm encouraged by is the current pitching situation and then the depth of pitching in the system.
Matt McLain was placed on the 10-day injured list on Tuesday with a strained left hamstring. Terry Francona said McLain had been bothered by the leg in recent days. They wanted to be cautious about it. He had the quote, "There's just so much baseball left to play that it just didn't seem like it made a lot of sense to try to push through this right now," Francona said. Normally, probably wouldn't even bring this up. I'd be like, hey, it's 10-day injured list, precautionary, no big deal. But we are talking about Matt McLain here, and we are talking about a guy whose biggest issue to this point in his career is that he can't stay on the field. I know it's minor. I know it's precautionary, but Skinny, does this raise a bit of a red flag for you this early, having to put McLain back on the injured list?
It does. I mean, there are certain guys, for whatever reason, they're just injury prone. It sucks. I don't know why that is. I don't know how that is. I mean, it's not a kid who doesn't take care of himself. Certainly loves the game, all the things you like. But as the old saying goes, the best ability is availability. And I mean, you're now, it was all last season. Now it's 2 weeks into not even 2 weeks into this season, and it feels like it just keeps compounding itself. I hope again maybe this is just a short-term thing, and the precaution was the right way to do this, to not try to play through it, compound it, make it even worse. And maybe this is all it needs is this time of rest. I hope this is the last thing, but I mean we've seen guys in all kinds of sports. You're like, man, he's really good, but he just can't stay healthy, and sometimes it's not the guy's fault. It just is what it is in life. I wonder if that's this guy.
Scale of 1 to 5, how concerning is this for Matt McLain?
I'd go a 1 because it seems like it's short term. Ask me next week if he's still on the IL and still bothered. I'd raise that probably closer to a 4 or a 5. Right now, a 1 because again, it feels like they think it's. I mean, I think they didn't put him on the IL for a few days. They played shorthanded for a couple of 3 games, thinking he might be able to come back. Instead, they figured, well, he can't, so let's go ahead and IL him because we need the roster spot. That sounds to me like it's a pretty short term thing.
Well, they're also going through that whole deal where everyone had food poisoning, it sounded like, including Terry Francona. That sounded like quite the scene there as they were going through that. But, I mean, I would definitely have it more than 1. I think because of McLain, maybe not this injury specifically, but just an injury in general for him or him going to the injured list in general is a little bit concerning. But I'm with you on the idea that, okay, let's say it's a 1 or a 2 for now, wherever you fall on that scale. If we hear the words second opinion or they're going to extend his stay on the IL, then all bets are off. Then it becomes major, 4.5 in my opinion, if there's any type of delay or issue with this.
His agent, Scott Boras, and we know that he's a hard guy to negotiate with, right? I mean, he sometimes will sit his clients out if he has to. I know there was a story last week about the Reds maybe trying to inch their way towards extending a McLain and get it done early. I mean, what a brilliant deal the Hunter Green deal looks like at the moment, right? The McLain one's interesting to me because I think he's a terrific player, and I'd like to get him under contract and not have to take this to free agency when the time comes. But at the same time, there's a risk with this guy now. I mean, there just is. Yeah,
that's a really good point. What's your comfortability? What's the threshold for willing to pay a guy like that? Because there really is, a ton of unknown, a ton of concern with his injury history and his lack of production to this point. But I think we would all agree, you can't find anyone in Cincinnati who's seen him to this point that doesn't think he will be a good baseball player if healthy. I mean, you're right. That's one that looks like Hunter Green. If you could get him now at a discounted rate, you could end up having one of the best 3 or 4 second basemen in baseball locked up for years to come, potentially like a Hunter Green situation. But it is a bit of a risk. How comfortable would you feel giving him a long-term deal with lots of money?
I don't think I would. I mean, I need to see him stay healthy now for extended periods, right? I mean, it's a whole season that was missed, and now you're very quickly into this season and time is missed. I think I need to see more, unfortunately, and not performance based, but just more of a being able to be an everyday guy.
Well, I think there's a difference too when you're talking about pitchers versus position players, because an average solid starter in Major League Baseball as a pitcher is still worth a lot of money. Even if you're not good. So getting Hunter Green you're paying a bit of a premium, but it's not near the type of premium you would pay a top starter in baseball. And the way he's developed over the last 2 seasons, he's starting to look very much like that. Also on Tuesday, Skinny, Cincinnati optioned right-hander Carson Spires to AAA Louisville, and recalled infielder Noelvi Marte, which you talked about a little bit, and Will Benson as well. What were your thoughts on the early personnel decisions there? I know like you had mentioned, being excited to see Marte, but just the idea of making the moves this early. Did you think it was time for a change, needed to start moving some guys, or is this? I know fans want a lot of changes made already. Where were you at on all of that?
Yeah, the Marte one, again, I just want to make sure that they feel like he's back to what he was. That I think we all agree they completely rushed him last year after he came back. He didn't even hit at Louisville, right? And then he didn't hit when he came up here. And I don't think it's Ped related. The Peds didn't do really anything for him the year before from a hitting perspective, in my opinion. He got daily at bats at Louisville, but is it enough to say, okay, listen, he's past that now. We need to see him at the major league level. We think he can perform at the major league level. The Will Benson one to me he was hot at Louisville. I think we talked about this last week, him and Rhys Hines and Marte. I mean, are these going to be classic 4A players? I think Will Benson is that classic 4A player. That being said, I mean, you're getting nothing out of Jake Fraley. I mean, it can't be much worse at this point. And maybe you feel like Will's fixed some stuff and he's going to come to the big leagues and he's going to do what he did for parts of 2023. Well, not off to the greatest of starts. So I get it. I just my patience is pretty thin on Will Benson, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and that's the thing about it. It's not so much that it's like a good or bad move. It's just like we kind of already know what's going to happen, right? There's not a lot available for this manager or the organization to do in terms of personnel. There's just not much upside to this roster as it's currently constructed, at least from a position player standpoint.
Yeah, no, right. That's just it. I mean, and part of this too is, I think to your point earlier, they feel like they're wasting some starting pitching, and the guys that are in the lineup at the moment, some of them aren't performing, and you gotta, if they're not, you gotta go to the next option, right?
Yeah, you do. Anything else on the Reds, Skinny, before we move on here?
No, it was disappointing to not get the sweep because they had it in their hands. I mean, they had it in the bag, for goodness sakes, but it was a little encouraging. And again, the Hunter Green, Lodolo back-to-back stuff, I mean, that gives you a chance to stop losing streaks and extend winning streaks, in my opinion, the way they pitch.
Yeah, and with baseball, with it being such a long season, if you're not a super fan who watches every 162, to me, one of the most fun things a baseball team can have is dominant starting pitching. So right. When you have the opportunity 2 nights a week to watch a guy like a Hunter Green and Nick Lodolo pitch for your team, that's a pretty good consolation package, even if your team is going to stink. And obviously it's very early. We don't know where the season is headed yet, but they've struggled a bit. I'm not super optimistic, but I will enjoy this summer watching those two guys take the mound, hopefully every fifth day. Hopefully they can stay healthy because they are fun to watch the way they're pitching right now.
Yep.
All right, let's move on to the Bengals. We're about 2 weeks out from the NFL draft. It's kind of a dead time in the NFL calendar unless you're really into the mock drafts, which I wouldn't say you're necessarily really into them, but you have to do them for your job. So that's what we're going to talk about. Give me some thoughts on what you've been seeing as you've been going through the mock draft process here.
So I'm taking a vacation week this week because it's just kind of the lull, to your point, the lull between the storms. So last week I did 3 mock drafts and with three specific things in mind. The first one I did was just keep the current 6 picks the Bengals have, see how that shakes out. I went to a site I kind of like, NFLDraftBuzz.com. They use the Jimmy Johnson trade chart, so it feels like there's a little reality to it, although some of it, as I was going through it, didn't seem very realistic to me, but that's neither here nor there. So I did one with keeping the 6 picks. I did another one where I accepted a trade in the first round. I traded back with the Houston Texans. This is the one I liked the most. And then I did one late in the week where I traded Trey Hendrickson. You could offer teams a trade. So I offered Trey Hendrickson. I didn't try to trade him to any AFC team. I traded him. I just went to every NFC team. I tried to poach a first-round pick from them. None of them bite on a first. As soon as I hit first round, because it asks, what do you want back in return? And you can just start clicking picks, and it's got a meter of accept or reject. As soon as I hit first round pick, it went from like the middle to reject. I'm like, okay, so nobody's got, I get it. That's probably true. Nobody's going to, I mean, At this point, they haven't been able to do it. So that's probably right. So I did pilfer a second, third, and a fourth round pick in this year's draft from the Detroit Lions for Trey Hendrickson. So I'll get to that.
Would you make that move right now?
If we're at a loggerheads to the point where this is going to just get ugly and distractive, I think I would.
Really? Man. I feel like that's concerning from a Bengals perspective, given the way they've drafted.
Right. My tact on this has always been he's under contract this year. He's going to play. So let's just get through this year with him, and he can kick and fuss and scream and pout and be upset, but he's going to have to play and play well. We talked about this last week. That's my end game, to be honest with you. That's
what I would do. The Bengals aren't a team that's quote unquote rebuilding. They're not starting from scratch where it's like, yeah, just get us a few more prospects and get something for Trey Hendrickson. You've got a chance, in theory, hopefully, everyone expects you to win right now, to compete this upcoming season, I'm taking the proven thing in Trey Hendrickson on a defense that quite honestly doesn't have a lot of proven things on it.
Yeah, understood. In that when I also went out and said I would try to sign as a Darius Smith, who's on the market, somebody along. There's a handful of veteran guys on the market that are 6 to 10 sack guys. I'm not going to replace Trey Hendrickson production. I understand that. I'm going to draft one as well. So in my first mock draft, the one I kept, it's funny, the one I kept the 6 picks and the one where I traded Trey, my first and second round picks were exactly the same. I took Mykel Williams, the defensive end from Georgia, in the first round, and this feels like a no-brainer if he's there in the second round. Xavier Watts, the safety from Notre Dame. I mean, Al Golden loves the guy. The reports on him are he's a little bit shaky as a tackler, but he's an elite back-end defender. I know Al at the Combine talked about him. He was asked about, you got one of your guys up here. He talked really glowingly about how it felt like they had the same heartbeat, that they, knew exactly what each other wanted when plays were going on and series were going on. And that sounds to me like a perfect fit. So that was both times I'm like, I can't not take that. And that's when he was on the board at the right spot. I mean, it wasn't like I reached for Xavier Watts. But the one I did that I kind of liked the most was the one I accepted the Texans trade. So the Texans, and in fact, it's funny, there was a guy on with Mo Egger yesterday, who I guess is a former scout who works, I think, for A to Z Sports. And he talked about, the Texans really, their offensive line is so, and he's right, is so bad that, because they were talking maybe potential trade scenarios for things. He goes, if I'm the Bengals, I get an offer from the Texans just to trade back from 17 to 25, I'd probably do it. So this program I used, the simulator I used, offered me a deal with the Texans. So I traded back to 25, and then I added 2 extra picks in the third round. And then because of that, I had 3 third-round picks. When it came time for me to draft in the third round, I got an offer from the Chargers for wide receiver Quentin Johnson, who was a first-round pick 3 years ago. He was productive last year. He had, I think, 50 catches for 700 yards. Had some drop issues. I think he had 7 drops. Change of scenery. He's my third receiver. I need a better option than Andre Yoshavash.
He's more talented, I would say.
Yeah, no question. And so as a third round, giving up that extra third-round pick work. So in that one, I took safety Nick Emenwari in the first round from South Carolina. I took a defensive end, Princely Amun-Mielon. I can't even say his name. Amun-Mielon from Ole Miss in the second round. I took a linebacker, Barrett Carter, in the third. Kentucky defensive tackle Deion Walker, who I'm really high on. He had a terrible year this past year, but I think he's he's a beast. He gets double teamed a lot. I think he didn't play up to his ability. I think he just got down on that team. I just think he's got upside, and he can rush the passer from the middle. I then took a center, Jared Wilson, in the fourth round, and that's kind of with an eye on the future. I'm not going to replace Ted Karras next year, so I got to get a future center. I waited until the fifth round to take a guard, and when I wrote it, I even said it's probably too late to wait for a guard. I probably should have taken one earlier, but I also think after the draft that this is how it unfolds. You get a young guard in the pipeline. I took Luke Kandra from UC. At that point, I do think they sign a veteran guard after that the draft is over. I mean, Brandon Scherf's still out there. He's probably still going to be out there when the draft is over with. And to me, again, if you don't address it early, and it just never fell on the board, maybe it will for the Bengals. It just didn't fall on the board for me to get a guard wherever those were. And then I took a flyer in the sixth round. I took a running back, Jaden Blue from Texas, who has home run potential. That gives me maybe a backfield of, Jaden Blue with home run potential, Samaje as a backup, and obviously Chase Brown as the starter. They still have not done anything with Zach Moss at the moment. I still feel like they'll waive him with an injury settlement at some point, but they haven't done anything with it.
Who was your first round pick in that scenario?
Nick Emenwari, the safety from South Carolina, who actually on a lot of draft boards, he's getting inside the top 20, so he may not even be there at 25.
So what I'm hearing is in all the drafts, you're taking defense first. Do you think that's pretty much automatic at this point?
I don't. If a guard falls for them in like the second or third round, I can clearly see them going that route. It just never fell for me in that regard. And like I said, when I wrote the piece on all these, I never took a guard until day 3. And part of that is it just never fell right. If it falls right for the Bengals, I don't see them doing it in the first round. Maybe they do. I just don't. I don't think they value the position that much for it to be a first rounder. But if it's a first rounder that they feel like, hey, if we don't get him, we are going to have to wait until day 3. We do need to get a plug and play guy. So maybe they do go that route.
Yeah, I guess everyone always gets so excited about talking about position of need or best available or that type of thing. Like what's going to be the draft strategy. And for this year, at least at the top of the draft, it really feels like you could go almost anything defensively, right? You could use anything defensively if you really feel like you've got the right guy. And then aside from that, it's probably a guard.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably right. Like I said, I probably waited around too late, but it never fell to me on the board where I have to go down 10 to 15 spots and go, okay, there's the next highest available guard, but I don't want to reach like that. So I didn't.
All right. Anything else on Bengals mock drafts, anything like that?
No, I'll come back with some more. I'll have a daily position roundup starting on Monday and just kind of looking at what the Bengals need at each position group and then looking at some potential players and what maybe rounds the Bengals would take those players. I do it every year. It kind of takes me day to day up until my final mock draft and then the draft itself on April 24th.
Yeah, and all the rumors start swirling as we get into the weekend and next week, and that'll be all going on next time when we record. So We'll talk a lot of NFL draft on next week's podcast, but let's get to our final segment for this week's show ahead of Ask Skinny Anything, and that is the college basketball transfer portal, which if you're local and you're a Kentucky fan, I think you're pretty happy. If you're not a Kentucky fan, you're maybe getting a little bit nervous, Skinny, but the Wildcats, they've brought in some dudes. They've got Jaden Quayton coming from Arizona State, a former 5-star big man who had a big year out there. Mohamed Diabate from Alabama, 6'7" small forward, also former 4-star, very talented. Jalen Lowe, a 6'3" point guard from Pitt, and Cam Williams, 6'8" wing from Tulane, all coming in, all pretty highly thought of in this year's transfer portal. He also has some really talented recruits when you talk about Jasper Johnson, Malachi Moreno coming in. This is getting pretty. This is getting pretty exciting for Kentucky fans.
So I kind of jotted down a quick roster for them because we knew we were going to talk about this today. So right now you've got the 4 guys coming in as transfers. You got the 3 guys who are all highly regarded recruits. I mean, I think everybody's mostly excited about Jasper Johnson, believe it or not. I mean, I'm excited about Malachi Moreno. I think he's got a lot of different skill set that in this type of system is going to go well. And so
he's an interesting fit in the system. I totally agree with that.
Yes. Yeah. And so far, and then obviously to your point, Jaden Quayton's, I looked up a couple of NBA draft sites to see where he was projected next year. He's projected a top 10 pick by most. Now that can always change, but as of right now, he's projected as a top 10 pick. The only reason he's not going in the draft this year, he's not old enough. He's not eligible from an age standpoint to enter the draft.
Isn't that crazy?
Or I think he's been a lottery, or he's in the lottery this year. So that's a pretty talented guy. And, these guys so far are still staying. Otega Owe, Colin Chandler, who got better as the year went on. Brandon Garrison, again, I think if he accepts the backup role, Quayton's can play center. He probably is a center in this offense. I mean, so maybe Garrison hops in the portal. And then the 2 Kentucky kids, Trent Noah and Tyler Perry. I mean, that right now is already a roster of 12 guys, and he's looking to add 1 more wing shooter. That's a damn deep roster, man.
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest thing. Keeping Owe along with some of the talent. Like normally when you think about, we're doing really well in the portal, we had to bring a lot in the way Kentucky is doing right now. That's because your roster's been decimated. You have nobody left. You need all new stars, but Kentucky has their star returning, at least in my opinion, their best player is Otega Owe. Yeah. To get him back and bring in these highly touted guys around him through the transfer portal, as well as some incoming freshmen. I mean, you're right. That roster is in about as good a shape as you can expect to be in the transfer portal era.
Yeah, and if he's just hunting and pecking, and there's some shooters out there. I mean, if he's just looking for just that dead-eye shooter, what a great final get that would be. I mean, Cam Williams actually is a wing. I mean, he's a forwardish guy, but he's really more of a shooter. I mean, the one guy that seems like a weird fit is Jalen Lowe. Now, the talent's there. The stats are off the charts. He was a ball-dominant point guard on a team that needed him to be that. I mean, is he going to fit in this system? I guess I'm going to take the talent and say, yes, he'll find a way to fit, but felt like he was just a very ball-dominant point guard.
Yeah, I'm guessing Pope feels comfortable with that. Felt like we need a guy who can take the ball, take control, and run our offense full time, but also he must feel like Jalen Lowe has enough feel and understanding of the way he wants to play that he will fit with the way they do things, moving the ball a bit more than he did at Pitt, obviously. But
honestly, maybe with the size and a Moreno, if Garrison's quick, maybe they go to some more high ball screen stuff as opposed to a ton of zoom action.
Yeah, has Garrison announced that he's coming back, or has he just not entered the portal yet?
He just hasn't entered the portal, so I'm not saying he's coming back. But as of right now, these guys, my thought on it is your thought that eventually he's going to look up and go, all right, I'm not getting any minutes on this team. I can get minutes elsewhere.
Yeah, he had an interesting situation last year where he was in the portal late and then was one of the last guys to commit, if I'm not mistaken, in the summer. Right. So I wouldn't be surprised if he might still enter the portal and have an interesting deal as well. But if I'm a UK fan, Brandon Garrison's like one of the last dudes I'm thinking about right now, whether he's there or not.
Yeah, he had some stretches where you're like, okay, I can see it. And there was a lot of stretches where it's like, why is he even on the floor?
Yeah, I mean, he's a fine player. You take him on your team, but in terms of this roster right now in the pecking order, he's down the list. He's not going to be in your main rotation. He's definitely not going to be starting. So, yeah, I mean, Kentucky, it just feels like everything's going pretty well for them as they enter their first full offseason with Mark Pope as their head coach. Obviously, last year was a bit of a crazy circumstance as they tried to put together an entirely new roster there. All right, as for the other teams, though, Skinny, a little bit different. With Cincinnati, it feels like almost everyone's jumped into the portal here. Dylan Mitchell, Dan Skillings, Reed, Betsy Page, Hickman, Griffith. I think that's all of them, but been.
Don't forget their walk-on 5'10" point guard, somebody named Rembert, who I don't even know who he is. He jumped in the portal.
I will not forget our man Rembert. Shout out to Rembert. They have added a few guys. Kirk Kriisa, the UK guard who sat out. He's bounced around a lot throughout his career. He is coming to Cincinnati next season. Also another combo guard from West Virginia, Sincere Harris, who's a defensive-minded player, not really much of an offensive player, is coming to UC. And then Jizzle James announced that he's staying, which is obviously huge news for them. Gives them at least something to build around. What are your thoughts there on how things are playing out in Wes Miller's offseason?
Well, if this had been Wes Miller's offseason 5 years ago, he would have gotten fired because apparently he was too brutal on the players. That's why they jumped into the portal. I mean, seriously.
It wasn't this bad, actually.
No, it wasn't. Actually, no, you're right. It wasn't this bad. But you had a president completely overreact. So anyway, the only one I think is a little bit of a surprise to me was Reed hopping in the portal.
Because he was starting to come on at the end of the year and getting more minutes.
Yeah. I mean, I guess here's my question, and I'll ask it as a combo question. Xavier did just get another guy, as we were right before the podcast. I'm sure you already are aware of his Poppin' Jai.
Oh, no. They were announcing that. They got him 2 days ago.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right, so they just announced it.
God, you just gave me a freaking heart attack like none other. I was starting to scramble.
No, I figured you already had known about it.
Not if it happened right before the podcast. I didn't.
They made it official right before the podcast.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to combo this question. How concerned should UC and Xavier fans be about where their roster is with 12 days to go in the portal?
Yeah, Xavier lost everyone except for Ryan Anderson. He's the only guy coming back with the new staff. They added shooting guard from Valparaiso, who was a high-level scorer, freshman of the year in their conference last year. Anthony Robinson was a big man from Virginia who didn't play a lot, raw, athletic, kind of defensive-minded dunker. Same thing with Pop Njai, the guy who you're referring to a 7-footer from UNLV. Mobile, agile for a 7-footer, can definitely run and dunk and block shots, but again, didn't play a ton and didn't put up much on the offensive end last year as a freshman.
And then the guy from New Mexico didn't do much.
Well, there are two guys from New Mexico they're bringing with them. Both of them are more bench players, I would say, or maybe potential rotation guys, but not guys that you're as excited about as a Xavier fan, just more guys that are kind of coming with Richard Pitino and the staff to fill out the roster and be familiar with the system. Now, as for where these two teams are at, UC and Xavier, and whether or not they should be worried right now, I would say I would not be worried about the fact that they've only done X amount in the portal to this point, right? Like everyone's saying, I can't believe they only have this guy. They need to land someone else. The portal closes in 2 weeks. That part I would not be worried about. Like if you go back and you look at how Xavier's put together their roster in the portal in previous years, even going back to last year when they had to do a ton of additions in the portal and they really rebuilt their roster with all new players mostly, that they didn't have anyone of importance yet at this point. And the transfer portal had opened a week earlier. So this is not that surprising that it's taken a little while to get some guys. The way it usually plays out is the first week, bunch of names jump in the portal. There's a few big names who already know where they're going. Yeah. But aside from that, it's just feeling it out. Then there's the dead period this week as the coaches all went to the Final Four. No visits are allowed to be made until tomorrow at noon. So once we get this weekend back up and running, you're going to see a bunch of visits. You're going to see a bunch of commitments happen again. After you get through kind of this next week, that's when you start to feel a little bit more like, okay, we have an idea of where things are headed. We have an idea of how this roster is going and whether or not they're getting some of the guys they want or if they're in on some of the guys. So I wouldn't worry about that. But what I would worry about is, one, there just aren't as many talented players in the portal this year. We don't have the 5th and 6th year grad transfers all over the place from the COVID years anymore. So there's just way fewer guys with a bunch of experience and production that are entering the portal for the second or third time that are ready to sign up and really help your program. Those guys just are way fewer and far between this year. And in addition to that, the guys who aren't as good are still making even more money than all those guys were last year. So, I mean, we're talking about a guy like Trey Green, who left Xavier because he couldn't fit and get in. He went to St. Louis. He's already committed there in this year's transfer portal. I've heard he's over 2x'd his payment from what he got at Xavier, which I believe was somewhere in like the 200-ish thousand, 250-ish thousand range. He's making more than that at St. Louis. I've heard the numbers are as high as 700,000 or 800,000, and that's from pretty good sources. So again, the numbers for this are astronomical. How anyone's putting together a roster in this climate, I'm not really sure. But specifically with UC and Xavier, I mean, I think that's a real thing. That's the part I would be concerned about, is how do you put together a roster this year? And that doesn't mean it's going to be like this for all years going forward, but this year's a little bit different because we have this transition of them waiting on the House versus NCAA settlement that you've probably been hearing about in the news, which will put in new rules starting on July 1st. And those new rules say that the schools will now be allowed to pay the players directly. But with that, the NIL collectives will be hamstrung in a major way. They will no longer just be able to hand out money freely. So right now, what you're seeing is these bigger football schools, especially that have a pretty big collective built up with some money sitting in there, they're emptying the collective right now, saying everything we got left, we'll pay you up front right now. And when you commit here, then in July, we're going to have revenue sharing to give you too. So you might be getting $2 million from us up front here in the NIL collective money, and then you're also going to be on a payment plan going forward for whatever your dollar amount is of the revenue share money. That's why the numbers are so crazy this year. And if I'm a Xavier UC fan, that's what I'm concerned about. Not the timeline, not the fact that they don't have enough guys on the roster right now, or they don't have the right guys on the roster right now. But going forward, the rest of this transfer portal, the next couple of weeks, I don't know how much better it's going to get because of the prices of a lot of these guys and the fact that there's just not that many great players in the portal.
So I guess I came at that as a collective answer or a collective question for you of how concerned should the fan bases be. Now I'll separate it as more of a statement, I guess. Richard Pitino's going to get slack because it's his first year, and maybe he doesn't build the perfect roster. I mean, Wes has to build a roster that goes to the NCAA tournament, and I just don't know. Listen, you weren't very high on Kirk Kriisa when he came to Kentucky, so I don't want to just crap on him because he's okay. He's okay. Yeah. Is he a difference maker? No. Sincere Harris is from all metrics one of the top on-ball defenders in the country. That's great. They need some toughness in on-ball defensive, but he doesn't score. And listen, Sean Abayev, for as great as he could be, he ain't coming in that league and averaging 20 points a game as a freshman. I mean, it's just – and listen, I get Jizzle's coming back, but you need Jizzle to take the next step that he didn't take this year, and maybe he does. But I'm just talking about from a sheer roster construction standpoint. Then when you're talking about – hey, you're going to be able to fill your roster, but is it more just catch as catch can? I got to fill my roster, so I'm going to take this guy, and I got to fill my – and then you have a roster that's a mess. Yeah.
And that, I mean, look, Jizzle and this Sean Abayev, really talented 5-star prospect they're bringing in, that would excite me as a UC fan. At least you've got something with some talent there to build off of and build around. Those are your two guys, clearly, I think, going into the year. But again, like you said, you're talking about a freshman that is going to have to do huge things against grown men. I mean, the transfer portal makes everyone older now, so he's going to be coming in as an 18-year-old, 19-year-old trying to play against 22, 23-year-olds, and maybe it'll go really well for him. Maybe he'll be one of the most talented freshmen in the country, but if he's not, then Wes Miller's probably going to be in a lot of trouble again next year unless he makes some big additions that, quite honestly, I'm just not sure that I can see them making the rest of the way in this transfer portal. I mean, I honestly wonder if you're a UC fan, do you root for him to fail in this cycle to get this over and done with, or do you root for him to pull out because he's got to pull a rabbit out of his hat at the moment, in my opinion, to make this roster an NCAA tournament roster. I mean, can you put a team on the floor? Sure, but are they better today than they were in that last game of the Crown? The answer would be obviously no. No. Now, is there reason to think, hey, it could be a different team? Maybe there's something to be excited about here with those two guys we just talked about? Yes, but like you said, you're going to have to really put something around him. And maybe for Wes, honestly, like it felt like he got caught in between trying to be this toughness, defensive, athletic style team that he was building initially, and then merged it with like, okay, we're going to go out and get Connor Hickman and we need a little more skill and shooters to go with it. Maybe there's more of a just deciding we are this type of team. This is our identity. This is our MIO. This is who we are. And we're going to moneyball this thing. Find guys that do what we want to do really well. In a way, I feel like that's kind of the approach that Richard Pitino and his staff are taking. And if you look, they're getting really long and athletic, raw big men. And they're going to have rim protectors. They're going to play up tempo with that kind of in your face, denying all over the court defensive style and play fast on offense where you're probably not going to use your bigs and post-ups at all, that's maybe how you can get some cheaper big men that way. I think that's what Xavier has kind of done here so far in the portal. Is that maybe what you do if you're Wes Miller, where you say, like with a guy like Sincere Harris, maybe we are just going to be the toughest, most defensive-minded, athletic sons of bees that you've ever seen in the Big 12, and that's how we're going to do it now. I don't know. If I'm UC, I'm looking for something different and something that I can latch onto and say, all right, maybe there's upside in here. Because to your point, I think a lot of people maybe want him to succeed right now in the transfer portal, but when they get back to the regular season, there's going to be a lot of UC fans that are hoping for Wes Miller and this team to fail just so they can move on from it.
Yeah, start over. I wonder this. I've never been in a Wes Miller practice. I don't know if he's a screamer, a yeller, hold a guy accountable. Maybe he didn't hold guys accountable. Maybe that was part of the issue with this team this year. And maybe he learns now that and maybe it's too late, that, no matter how I coach these guys, they still can leave on me. So, it's time to coach my way.
That's the biggest thing is there's no, and I think it's a problem with the current state of college basketball. I think it's really hard to coach guys and hold them accountable. But if you don't do that, you have no shot.
Correct.
Right? They're going to leave either way, especially if you're not successful. So you might as well let them hate you and think you're a hard ass and everything else, because if you win doing that and they do really well and you're earning them money, they'll probably like you and they'll probably stick around, or at least you have better chances with that. So yeah, I would agree with you that I get the sense, there are a few things that we talked about late in the year where it's like, one of your point guard, your season's unraveling, one of your players is making boneheaded turnovers and you're like patting him on the head coming out of the game like it's okay instead of lighting him up. And again, I'm not a big rah-rah, you got to scream in your players' faces and act like you're going to fight them all the time like you're Tom Izzo or something. But I do think there is some level of, it doesn't seem like he looks like he wants to be their friend. He looks like he wants to be called a player's coach. I think he does have that reputation, and we've kind of seen where that's gotten him.
No, right. And guys left anyway.
Yeah. I think that's pretty much it on the transfer portal. You have any other thoughts?
Well, we actually didn't put a bow on the NCAA championship game. What'd you think?
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So I thought it was a good Final Four.
I did too.
Fun games. The Duke-Houston game was absolutely crazy, the finish to that one. And then I thought, I see people complaining about the championship game, saying that it was not a good basketball game, even though it was competitive. I guess the inference there being that it was too physical at times. There was too much defense.
I texted you I didn't think it was very well officiated.
I didn't think it was very well officiated at all. I just always think it's kind of funny how these sports fans and media types have decided that, like, they get to decide what is good or bad basketball, right? Like, to me, it would be winning basketball is usually considered good basketball. And yes, there are times where we say, well, that was an ugly style of play, it was way too physical, but it just seems like there's way too much of the, like, oh, that was terrible basketball. It's like, really? Was it? Because it looked like two of the best teams in the country playing really, really hard. And yes, there was good defense, but there were also some great individual offensive moments that usurped the good defense. So I thought it was a fantastic Final Four and a pretty darn good championship game after what was mostly a letdown of a tournament up to that point.
Yeah, I got to tell you, you know me, I've harped on this, and I go crazy in my own practices when guys jump at jump shooters because I just don't think anything's gained of it. You maybe block 1 out of 100 shots, and chances are you'll foul 5 times out of 100 times. You're really not affecting it, and then you take yourself out of rebounding position. But man, that closeout by Walter Clayton, the fact that he did it kind of sideways where he wasn't going to make contact, was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. No, it was. And that brings up another good point, too, where everyone always wants to run the old picket fence play with 16 screens and then a wide open 3 in those end of game moments. There's a pretty good example of why you don't see a lot of coaches getting too complicated and run a bunch of actions within their final plays, because if you leave yourself with little time and there's a lot of stuff, sometimes you just become too robotic and there's nothing left for you to do at the end of it all if it gets blown up. And that was the case right there. I think a lot of times you just put the ball in your best player's hands, set a high ball screen for him, and let him make a play for you. And that's why coaches do that so often.
LJ Cryer should have had a high ball screen and go.
Yeah. And I love a little bit of movement, like, run something on the weak side so he has something to throw back to or whatever. I'm not saying, I do not like the just isolation, put the ball in Cooper Flagg's hands and he's all alone on an island to isolate. Give him something. But for all the people who do complain about the lack of set plays on those final possessions, that's why you don't see it more often, because it can result in that. And when that happens, everyone looks really stupid.
Yeah. I mean, I told you before the tournament started, I thought Florida was the best team, and yeah, they survived some scares, but I think they had the right combination of players. They had good guards, a great guard in Clayton. The bigs were very serviceable at what they did. They all had, Chinny Lou was your muscle guy. The other two guys had a little mixture of skill. It was a great roster, and I thought the kid did a good job coaching.
I mean, Todd Golden may send some questionable text messages, may be into the co-eds on campus, but the man can coach. There's no doubt about that. That was an impressive coaching job that he just did this year.
Yes, he did.
All right, let's get into Ask Skinny Anything, which, by the way, I don't know if it was last show or 2 shows ago, we talked about the ice cream sandwich, the Rice Krispies ice cream sandwich.
Right, yes.
I did try it.
And?
Good, very good, but also, I would say, kind of a novelty thing that I don't know I would ever need to buy again. It was good, but I don't see me eating a lot of them.
Did it say on the package 850 calories for this one serving?
I think it was more like 400-ish,
okay.
Which a lot, but for a pretty small little sandwich, but it was thick. I will say that. We already did your picks for the Masters, so I'll take that question off the list. Will Zach Taylor win a Super Bowl in Cincinnati?
I would say if it doesn't come in the next 2 years, I don't know how it comes.
I like that answer. That's a different one.
Yeah.
Is that the Burrow window, this core window that's open right now, still feels like the time they have to do it?
Is just making the playoffs enough anymore for them? I mean, he's got to make it this year. I mean, you can't go 3 years in the Burrow era without making the playoffs. And again, there's been some mitigating circumstances, but there's full pressure on him to get this team to the playoffs. Is that enough to just make the playoffs for a couple of years? Or does making a deep run buy you more time? That's why I say the next couple of years. And again, maybe if he makes a run to the championship game in 2 straight years, okay, you're back in that window of just keep taking shots. This guy's getting us to it. We'll extend that run. And yeah, I think you could. I think it goes through the Burrow window. I just don't know if it goes with him through the Burrow window.
Interesting point there. I for some reason, I don't know why, we talk about it all the time, but I hadn't really considered the idea of like, hey, Zach Taylor could get fired in the next year or two.
Maybe he's got enough cachet from maybe they. Listen, again, the coordinator paid the price this time around. Who pays the price the next time around?
No, yeah. I not that I had never thought about it, but with this question, I wasn't looking at it from that perspective of like, maybe he doesn't get to see it through. So here's my question for you now. If let's say they get to the second round this year and lose, or the playoffs, and then sneak into the wild card game the following year and lose right away, where are we at with Zach Taylor? Is that like, do we start questioning things?
Great question. Because listen, Mike Tomlin keeps buying himself time, right? By the Mike Tomlin never has a losing season, keeps making the playoffs, but it feels very stale in Pittsburgh. And if I'm a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, it probably feels very stale to me as well. That okay, we just keep eking in, and then we don't do anything. So we're kind of in that no man's land. I don't think you'd be in no man's land because you have your quarterback, where Pittsburgh literally doesn't at the moment. Yeah. And maybe losing T.J. Watt on top of it based on his cryptic Instagram post the other day. That's a great question because this family doesn't like firing people. They don't, and so maybe that buys him enough time. That is a great question that was asked. It really was.
And I'd also like to just say, as much as they have a ton of talent, you feel like they need to win a championship, they should do more. It's also hard for me as a Bengals fan who's been around this franchise now for 3 decades to look at a guy who has gotten to a Super Bowl, gotten to an AFC championship, and then we're talking about him winning a couple more playoff, or at least one more playoff game, and saying he hasn't done well or the Bengals are definitely going to do better after him, because I feel like whoever's coaching the Bengals is always handicapped by the organization and the people around them. So I don't know. I'm not trying to be a huge Zach Taylor apologist, but it's just crazy to think about the Bengals firing a coach who's in the playoffs.
No, I get it. And again, maybe that is enough to say, okay, we're on the right track. We're making the playoffs. It's the old, just keep making the playoffs. And if you've got a good enough roster, eventually, you're going to get your way through. I think the problem has been that the Kansas Cities of the world have made this look easy somewhat, They're always in there. They're always in the AFC Championship game. And yeah, you're not going to win every AFC Championship game, but they've won enough to go to the Super Bowl. And you go to enough Super Bowls, you're going to win a Super Bowl. I mean, it feels like they've made it too easy to look and go, well, there's a blueprint.
And I guess the question is, how much should the math change for the head coach once you have your quarterback?
No, fair point. I think it's changed significantly.
I think that's the way a lot of people feel. It's like once you get that quarterback where everyone's decided, like, yeah, he's championship level good. And in Joe Burrow's case, I think he's even shown that by getting you to a Super Bowl that first year when you probably weren't talented enough. Then I think the pressure does set in for the head coach and everything changes a bit then.
Well, and listen, they played championship caliber offense last year, right? Overall.
Yes, at least after the 4th week or so.
and he's in charge of that part of it. So okay, let's give him the kudos there. I think again they've pointed the finger at the defensive coordinator. They haven't exactly gone out and upgraded the defense a whole lot. They've added a couple of pieces, and again maybe some more comes through the draft. I clearly think that they think a new voice in that room with a little tweak of personnel is going to make that unit better. Okay, that's fine. That should be the scapegoat group from last year. You get to do that as the head coach, in my opinion. Okay, that your group played at a championship level, the other group didn't. I think a lot of it is probably through personnel decisions that are beyond your control. But okay, now you've made your change, and to that guy's point, you probably get a couple of years. I mean, I even think if they don't make the playoffs this year and the offense plays great again, the defense doesn't. Now you can point the finger at, well, it wasn't Anarumo. We just don't have the right personnel. You probably get yourself by one more year, but to that question, then that's in that two-year frame I'm talking about.
Yeah. No, that answer took me I didn't think this, I thought this was a throwaway question when I asked it. And then you started answering. I was like, wait, this is actually kind of interesting. So thank you for that question, whoever sent it in. What's the most uncomfortable moment Skinny has ever had as a reporter? Maybe a tough question that he had to ask.
It was when I was a young guy and I was in college and I was doing Kentucky games on the radio. We did the home games on the student station. And I was the play-by-play guy. So I was able to go to Joe Hall's weekly press conference, a press luncheon. Literally, Joe sat at one part of the table. They had a big, just wooden table, and the writers and reporters all sat around that. And after lunch, you asked Joe questions. And this was when James Blackman was a freshman, and James was a highly regarded, his son, obviously, was a heck of a player. But James was a highly regarded freshman, and he was working. He's in and out of the lineup. And I can't remember if it was a game where he just played minimal minutes or didn't even play at all. And so all of a sudden I thought I'd get the gumption to ask a question. And I swallowed hard and I said, Coach, the fact that James hasn't played much of late, do you think that's going to slow his progress? And he basically dismissed that as the dumbest question ever. I felt about that tall until Jerry Tipton of the Lexington Herald-Leader stepped in and goes, well, it's a good question. You going to answer it? And I went, oh. Perked up like, oh, okay. But that was one moment where I feel like, you know what? We're all going to ask stupid questions, and maybe it was a stupid question, but you know what? Move on to the next question. Or sometimes it's not a stupid question. It made the person feel uncomfortable because it was a good question.
Yeah, and that can be tough. And I actually have
my face turned 1,000 shades of red when he beat me like a mule on that one.
And it's funny, when you're young, that impacts you so much more. Once you've been through it a little bit and you have a little bit of confidence yourself, it's like you look at someone acting like that and you're like, wow, what a petulant child or what a baby. You look at that as his issue, not your issue, right, once you get to a certain point. But when you're young, you don't see it that way. So shout out to Jerry Tipton for stepping in for you there. That's a big moment when you're a young reporter, having a veteran have your back.
I'll give you two more, too, and one of them's a funny one. And it wasn't always me, but I remember asking Jerry, and this was when I was a reporter at a small daily in Maysville, Kentucky. And, that's a big high school area, so I mostly covered high schools, wrote columns, but I occasionally make it over to UK for a story or a column or something like that. And Jerry Claiborne, who was the football coach, I can't remember how I asked it, but I've heard him answer it before. I think I used the word if in a question. And he said, ain't going to play the old ifing game again today, boys. I don't play the ifing game. And I always love that. Ain't going to play the ifing game.
I should use that more often now.
Yes,
ain't going to play the ifing game.
Ain't going to play the ifing game today. And then the other one, actually, that made me feel 1,000 times. Guy Morris in Kentucky won a big game at Mississippi State his first full year as a head coach. And that I think that they were on probation, so they couldn't go to a bowl, but that might have guaranteed them a winning season coming off a 2-10. And so at his Monday press conference, I asked him, coming off a win like that with no bowl to play for, how are you going to get your guys ready, emotionally? He goes, I'm glad you asked that. And he ripped off his shirt and he had a Mighty Mouse t-shirt on. He goes, I knew somebody was going to ask that question. I'm like, good for you, man. You were prepared for that.
Real quick, can I give you a Marvin Lewis and a Nell Fuchs story from my side? So
I think I've heard the Marvin one before, but I can't.
Yeah, so I was filling it. I was doing some Enquirer stuff for the prep side of things, but occasionally you guys would have a day. You were working on the beat at the time. It was you and Paul Daner for the Enquirer for the Bengals, and there would be a day where like maybe you had something else going on or something. So I'd fill in as the extra guy there at training camp. And so it was the first day of like full pads, and they do the Oklahoma drill, and that's always a big day at training camp. Everyone wants to talk about that. So we get into the scrum, question, fine. Okay, I'm going to kind of quiet for a second. So I go, Marvin, did you see anything that stood out to you from the Oklahoma drill with a little bit of hitting going on? Looks to see who it was because he didn't recognize the voice and says, not that I would tell you. It's like, okay, fair enough. And then another time, Sydney Moss, as you remember, was a big story when we were covering preps. She had gone from Ryle initially to Boone County. I was covering the 33rd District semifinals that night with the finals the following night, and it was going to be Ryle playing against Boone County. So Sydney Moss would be playing her old school. So I ask a bunch of questions to Nell Fuchs about the game that was just played, and then my final question to go ahead and sort of put it forward to the next game up ahead is like, hey, Sydney Moss is going to be playing her old teammates. You know, a lot of it's going to be made about that. And before I could even like get into the question, she just lit me up. I was like, it's not Sydney Moss against Ryle. It's Boone County against Ryle. Do you see the Boone County on the jersey? And just lit me. And everyone loves Nell Fuchs. Like, she's a legendary high school coach in Northern Kentucky. Everyone says she's a great lady, but that's like one of my brief interactions with her was that right there. And she just lit me up as a young guy who was in college still.
She is actually outstanding. You actually did pretty good justice to her voice. She has the intensity of Kim Mulkey. I mean, she just does. I mean, that's the way she coached. But yeah, I mean, her husband was my high school baseball coach, but I loved her as a coach, loved dealing with her as a reporter, but she didn't suffer fools. I can tell you that. Her answer, I can see why she did it. I'm sure you can too, but it's just funny to hear that the way that was presented.
Yeah, and it's always fun. Like, you know, the reporter is kind of the messenger that gets shot a lot of times with those situations. Like, it had nothing to do with me. It was her trying to get Sydney and her team to, like, don't worry about the extracurricular stuff tomorrow night. But I was the one who got the brunt of that in that moment.
Yep.
All right. Last year, not me, but this person, I asked Skinny whether he thought Wes Miller or Pat Kelsey was the better head coach. And he said Pat Kelsey. Does he want to gloat about that pick now?
I don't want to gloat about that pick, but that was – listen, I think Pat's always been a terrific coach. You know, it didn't work out at UMass. I mean, that was one of the weirdest situations ever, where he was about to be introduced and left out the back door. But man, I'll tell you what, you talk about a guy killing it in the portal at the moment. I mean, he is killing it in the portal. And coming off a year in which he turned that team, flipped it completely on its head. I don't want to gloat about it, because I feel bad for UC fans, because you are stuck at the moment. And I felt you were stuck last year, and unfortunately, you're still stuck until next year, probably.
Yeah. And with Pat Kelsey, it's interesting because, you know, he hadn't really, like, he had done well at those other places, but he hadn't lit it up or done anything crazy successful at those other stops. And then you get to Louisville, and he had a great year, but there's also some people who kind of murmuring, well, the ACC was terrible this year, and that roster wasn't great, so where are we going after this year? Man, the work he's already done in the transfer portal now this spring definitely gives you a little more fire as a Louisville fan to the idea that not only did he have a good year coaching a team that maybe wasn't as talented, but he can maybe run a program too and put a good roster together for next year.
Yeah.
All right, the final question here. Does Skinny have a go-to brand of summertime short pants as we get closer to warmer weather?
Yeah, you know what? I don't even look at brands. I have to go to my closet to actually officially know what they are brand-wise. It's just the normal ones that hit you right about the knee. I don't like the short shorts.
You like the golf feel with a little bit of dry fitness to them?
Yes. Yeah, I do have. It's funny. So I have like 2 pairs of grays, 2 pairs of khakis, 2 pairs of tan, 2 pairs of kind of brownish, 2 pairs of black. And it's weird. Like, one brand is that really thin, dry fitish stuff, and another one's got a thicker waistband. I don't like the thicker waistband as much.
Yeah.
I don't know how I wound up with those. I think I guess my wife bought some of that stuff for me. I don't know which ones. Maybe I bought the wrong ones for myself and she bought the right ones. But I wear them because they still look fine. I just don't like the feel of those. I like those really thin, I don't even know what you'd call them.
Like dry fit is usually what I think of. But yeah, that like the golf shorts is the way I think of it.
Yes.
All right. That's all we got.
Right, appreciate it very much. We'll be back next week. Again, 1 week from the draft next week. So we'll talk some NFL draft, talk some more Reds, and the portal will be back flowing. And we'll see what UC and Xavier have done by then. For Rick Brewing, I'm Richard Skinner. It's been the Skinny Podcast, the weekly Poe Pre-Edition, presented by Blake, the Attorney Maislin.